that feeling in that moment of like, my gosh, I'm onto something, like this is new, unique. And then taking that and turning it into a sellable, like scalable product is so exciting. And I think, yeah, following and finding your passion and sharing that with the world. At the end of the day, that's what sells people. People buy from people. People love connecting with me and the product. Those are your diehard loyal customers.
Hi, welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina, and I am here today with Jake Bagnall, and he is the founder of Clean Dough Co. They're a California-based company that is doing some interesting things in the cookie dough space, and Jake's going to tell us all about his company and how they got started. Thanks for joining me, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Leah. I'm happy to be here and happy to talk all things ancient grains and healthy cookies and exciting
Yes.
stuff.
Healthy cookies, music to my ears. Everybody they don't want to give up snacks just because they're on a healthy journey. So you're in a great spot right now, I think, with where we are.
Yeah, it's a fun category to be in. I mean, whenever I'm sampling and stuff, like who's willing to turn down a cookie? And I also get lots of texts now, like daily, from random people being like, "This cookie is claims to be healthy, but it just like doesn't taste the same." And I always have to, explain to them the differences and what we're doing and what everything else you see on the grocery store shelves is.
Yeah, yeah, because there's a lot, especially like I think in the early days of attempting to be healthy, and I'm talking like back in the 90s. There was
Mhm.
some pretty chemical tasting cookies out there that were healthy, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's come a long ways.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of watch and follow all of the trends in food. And it obviously has touched the cookie space a lot as well. And you go through, 10-year periods of people avoiding one thing and then avoiding another. So going through those cycles. But one thing that we're really happy about is we kind of just use original, even paleo, you could call it, ingredients that have been around forever. It's not a trend. It's not zero cal, next new hot thing. It's real food that is here to stay, I think.
Yeah, exciting. Well, definitely excited for you to tell us some more about that in a moment. Let's kind of take a step back. And so you're an architect by trade.
Mhm.
And so you don't come from the CPG space originally, but certainly getting your feet quite wet in the space now. Tell us about the moment where you decided you need to take this journey and start this
Yeah.
business.
So I'm pretty fresh out of college. Architecture was a long, 6 or 7 years in schooling. I graduated from USC going on 3 years ago now. And the first year, I'm actually fourth generation architect. So I grew up in and
Hmm.
around the business, knew everything about it. And the funny thing is actually, like, my family firm specializes in natural food grocery stores.
Okay.
And so I've spent so much time. I'm from Santa Cruz, huge hippie hub. And it's really like where a lot of health trends begin and some of the first like co-op type health food stores. And we've been the architects for those stores for, 20 years now.
Hmm.
And so since the time I was like 15, 16 years old, I was in and around the office, looking at plans, kind of starting to work on architecture design, kind of starting to even manage projects. And like when I was 18 years old,
Yeah.
by the time I graduated college and I was 24 at the time, I was like kind of itching to do more in a way. And that kind of summer I was working and I didn't feel like I had full creative freedom on everything I was doing. And it just like was kind of nerving me because I'm this like very creative person and I had to like, hear all this input from clients and, all these constraints and stuff. And so the cookie company kind of was my first outlet of like, wow, I have full creative control. I can do whatever I want. Like, let's
Yeah.
just go crazy with this. And it started feeling really, really like, yeah, freeing to be able to
Hmm.
do that. And within the first 2 months, I was like, whoa, I think I'm really onto something. And I finished up like my last project about 4 months after first conception of like brand idea.
Okay.
And I kind of took the leap and I was like, you know what? Like, I just need to go full time on this. And that was just last year. So it's been a quick journey and we've grown really quickly, but also at the same time, like taking it at our own pace. And I think that's been super important for me to remember too, that like everyone is on their own kind of journey and not to try and rush
Hmm.
to the top immediately.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's definitely one thing that I've found in this particular industry is, everybody kind of takes it at their own pace. Some people super fast to market, go, go, go. Some people take it slow, get things right, really kind of explore the product and the process. But it's also a very supportive community. Lots
Mhm.
of people are willing to share the ups and the downs that they've gone through, share resources. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. From the very beginning, actually. And it's funny, you even find people starting to be like, hey, I know like the founder of this, like very adjacent, if not competing
Yeah.
brand. Like, do you want to talk with them? And I'm like, you know what? Sure. Like, it's
Yeah.
really cool that everyone is so helpful because as like a small independent brand, you really are up against like these huge conglomerates with so much money. And so everyone at the end of the day is on that same mission of like, okay, how can we take some of this in on our own side? And the health
Hmm.
space especially, like everyone again shares that mission of how can we make this country healthier, happier, and just overall better. And so that's been really cool, and being able to work with some of those brands. First one that comes to mind is just like Sydney from French Squirrel. We met, hit it off very quickly, and have now been able to, make a peanut butter cookie together. And she's doing
Excellent.
amazing things on her end. And we get to like, she's almost been a little bit of a mentor. She's been in the space for 6 years now. And so as
Hmm.
a a newcomer into the game, it's always good to have some of those people, on your side and being able to give you tips and tricks and stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, how was you come from this long line of architects? How did your family take it when you said you were stepping away from the family business?
Yeah, it was pretty funny, especially after spending, like I said, like 6 or 7
Yeah.
years studying architecture. It's always been my passion, and like I said, since I was like 16, I kind of knew I was always set for architecture. It's
Hmm.
another one of those fields that if you're not so passionate about it, it's just really not for you because it's all consuming. And in the beginning, I don't think they really took like they didn't really know how to take it because my dad's,
Yeah.
getting to the age he's like ready to retire. I was going to take over the
Mm.
family business, and like I kind of just had to break down. I was like this is the time. Like I'm only gonna have this one shot. Like architecture will be there,
Sure.
and they're the most supportive people ever. So it's been easy, but it was definitely funny figuring that out. Like a health, telling people like a cookie company too. It's just kind of a silly idea, I guess. In a way, it sounds silly, and yeah, it's been good. And they love the cookies. They eat them daily now, so
Yeah.
they're
So,
always
yeah,
number one
you
support.
won them over with your good recipes and
Yeah.
mission.
And they kind of like watched my health journey over the past 4 and 5 years, and every time I was home, I was the one making dinner and cooking for them, and I grew up in the
Hmm.
kitchen with my mom. My mom always made amazing dinners, like, family dinner was, like, a very important thing and staple in our
Hmm.
household, and so also an amazing baker, always doing dessert, sweets, and, like, every time I would come home, she would be baking and making desserts, and I was like, "I just don't eat that way anymore," and I was kind of, like, showing her things that I was making, and I would start making things, and then it was like I kind of took over the role as like head chef. It was pretty funny. So
So,
now
so
I
the
go
reins did pass down in a
yeah,
different way than expected.
yeah, exactly. Literally, it was like kind of the opposite of what everyone was imagining. So it's kind of cool. It was my mom's dream to open a bakery, actually. She always talked
Oh,
about
wow.
it with her sister. And so now that I
Yeah.
have this cookie company, I'm hoping like one day in the near future, I'll be able to include her in some way. She's always like, if you need me to manage like the manufacturing and baking, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more intensive than that, but hopefully we can work
Yeah.
her in at some point. She's the number
Uh,
one taste tester, that's for sure.
that's an important job.
Yeah.
So tell us about why a healthy cookie. How did that come about?
So, yeah, it starts on my health journey. I cut out refined sugar. That was the first thing I think was like a big no no. It was, like I said, I grew up around baked goods and there was always fresh
Hmm.
cookies, cakes, muffins like sitting on my counter. And I loved them as kids. Like, who doesn't,
Hmm.
love a baked good? And it got to the point where, yeah, I would go home and I just couldn't eat that stuff anymore. And I was really anti dessert. I was eating like sweet potatoes. I would cook them in coconut oil and honey. It was never about restriction or
Hmm.
calories or fat or sugar. It was like, let's just source the highest quality and eat food that actually is doing something for my body.
Hmm.
And that at the time was the best source of carbs. I really liked sweet potatoes and I loved how they tasted in coconut oil and honey. And it was like, I started thinking, I was like, that's kind of what a cookie is. It's a carb, a fat, and a sugar. And I was telling people, like my roommate at the time in college was like, I was like, this is my cookie. And he like laughs at me. Like, obviously it doesn't taste like a cookie, but to me, it was that thing. And so I always had cookies in the back of my mind. Like, I think I remembered the nostalgic taste of a cookie and it
Right.
was something that I always like yearned for. And so come like summer after graduation, I was getting really like into making desserts. I
Hmm.
had like went through 3 or 4 years of making like honing in my chef abilities, like for cooking. And I was never one to follow recipes or anything, but I started making like superfoods as desserts. And so the first
Okay.
kind of thing I went to was like ice cream, and I was using, really high quality dairy and natural sugars and eggs and stuff and making it like how it used to be made. And there's a lot of cool companies in that space now. I'm
Mhm.
glad I'm not in the ice cream space. It seems like really, really hard to deal with like cold shipping and all that stuff. So
Oh, definitely.
glad I kind of moved away from that. But I came across just like an influencer online, and she was baking with this ancient grain called einkorn. I had never heard of it, didn't even
Mhm.
know anyone who even knew what it was. So I was
Yeah.
like,
So
whoa,
tell
this
us,
is
what is this einkorn?
yeah. So I started looking more into it, right? And I was so fascinated. She would always talk about the health benefits. And I looked at her as like, wow, she really has like strict standards. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, like if it's good enough for her, it's got to be good enough for like me to try out. And the whole like gist of the grain is that it's highly digestible and it's never been hybridized like modern wheat. So it technically is wheat. It is the world's original grain though. So it goes all the way back to like the Fertile Crescent. It's the first crop humans ever harvested, and we've been eating it forever. And so there's this really cool company farm in the United States, small family farm. They've only been doing it for I want to say 20 years ish now. It started
Okay.
as a very small operation in Idaho. It's called Grand Teton Ancient Grains. And he kind of, same thing, like found this grain and was all of a sudden like really drawn to it and
Mhm.
started planting it over time. It's, gotten bigger and bigger. But she was talking about how she orders grain from them. It's fresh. And she had, a mill that she had on her countertop. But I
Uh-huh.
was literally buying this grain, the whole berry of it, and putting it into my home blender and then hand sifting like the flour. And I
Yeah.
started baking with it. The first thing I ever set my sights on was like, okay, let's make a really good sourdough boule. Because as much as I craved a cookie, I also craved like pasta and bread, like most people do. And so I was like, everyone, sourdough is a really hot topic now too. So I was like, what if I can make like a really good sourdough loaf with this? I started fooling around with that, had my sourdough starter, and it was like the first one that turned out. I was just like, I caught like that hook, It was like, my gosh, this is unbelievable. I feel like I can enjoy these things again. And it was kind of like that was the gateway into sweeter baked goods. It was then
Okay.
muffins and cakes and all sorts of things. Every single morning I was waking up before work at like 5 a.m. and baking. Like, and so
Like a
this was
true
at the
baker.
yeah, I was amateur baker, like moved back to my parents' house. Actually, I was living in the backyard and working at the family firm. And like my mornings started with me baking in the kitchen, and they would, get up and always went for a walk, but they'd come home after their walk and like there'd be fresh baked goods. So everyone loved it, and they were like, oh my God, this
Sure.
is so funny because I was the one who was avoiding, my mom stopped baking as much because I wasn't eating it as much. All of a sudden the house was just full of fresh baked goods every single day. And it was kind of a real full circle moment again. From there, it was like, what is one of the, like, I started thinking we really liked hosting. I've always been like a host. My family hosts big
Mhm.
dinner parties every single kind of weekend in the summer. We did, stuff in the backyard, and then
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, Christmas, that whole thing. And so I was thinking, like, what would be just like a unanimous, like, loved baked good that you could serve by itself, with accompanying other things that everyone loves. And it was the chocolate chip cookie. And so I set myself, so I
Mhm.
was like, I'm going to make the best tasting chocolate chip cookie that actually is healthy and good for you. And at the time, I wasn't doing market research like in the stores or anything. I knew nothing really existed like it just because of how niche the grain was, but I knew that it had the potential to make something that tasted like a real baked good, but actually like did something for you. And I did a lot of extensive research on, the best cookies, the best chocolate chip cookies in America, like what they looked like. And I had my vision of like what I liked out of a chocolate chip cookie. It was like
Sure.
that chewy, flat, like rippled edge,
Yeah.
like bakery style cookie. And I was like, there's got to be a way to make this with this grain. And so, sure enough, like it came together. I was even making my own chocolate at home at the time. And
Mm.
I remember the first time, it was like the first batch I ever made. I was just like by myself in the kitchen and no one was actually home, and I made it myself, and I like took the first bite and it came out of the oven. I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I was like, I left some like dough for my parents to bake later, like the next
Okay.
day actually. But that was the first cookie. And ever since then, it's kind of been history. Like I was obsessed and they were obsessed. And I knew the cookie had more power than just like to appeal to health nuts or someone who was so
Mhm.
extreme like I was.
So yeah, that's amazing that you kind of hit on that recipe, and hope you took good notes in that session there. So how is einkorn healthier than what we currently see in products?
So a lot of modern wheat has become over hybridized and over modernized for crop yield, essentially, pest resistance, all sorts of things. Like, of course, over the time of farming and industrialization, like it's become about profit, it's become about margins, it's become about crop yield.
Yeah.
And that changed the genetic structure of the wheat. And you heard everyone talk about gluten's bad for you, gluten
Hmm.
upsets your stomach. And a lot of people experience that too. It's not just like made up. A lot of people eat bread and pasta. And like, I think over a third of the United States at least avoids gluten in some
Hmm.
sort of way, but only 1% roughly like actually has a celiac, like
Right.
gluten, like really
Like
actually
a
triggers
true.
a true intolerance. And so the cool thing about einkorn is it's never been hybridized and it's
Hmm.
the original genetic structure. And you can actually look at it on a microscopic level and like the chromosomes are different. There's 14 instead of 44. And modern wheat has like, it's like AA, BB, and CC. And it's actually like the last CC and DD are the last kind of like chains, I guess you would call them, that are
Hmm.
causing that like disruption and discomfort, like in bloating and like, yeah, just overall indigestibility. And so einkorn is only has the original four, like the AABB. And so many people, almost everyone, can eat it and not have any sort of like disruption or discomfort in
Yeah. So
digestion.
easy.
So it's way easier on the gut. And we call it gentle gluten on our packaging is kind of like
Okay.
what we've come up with. But it's really like a miracle grain. We like if you look into it, it has almost every single like essential amino acid and
Mm.
vitamin in it. It's a complete protein and we're milling it fresh and then using the entire grain. So we're getting extra fiber. Our cookies end up having roughly 5 grams of protein and 5 grams of fiber, which is really good even for like if you look at a lot of protein bars, for one, many of them don't have nearly any fiber. Maybe they have 1 or 2
Right.
grams. But a lot of the plant based protein bars that are clean at least have 10 to 12 grams. So if you put it next to a protein bar, getting our cookie has more fiber,
Mm.
a healthy dose of protein, like 5 grams of protein, a protein bar, you're getting extra 5 or 6 grams. Like it's really negligible at that point. I tell people, like, just enjoy your cookie and
Yeah.
then eat some other source of protein because at the end of the day, enjoying your food and what you eat is like what's sustainable long term. And you can
Hmm.
only go so long. Like I learned, like, eating protein bar to like satisfy that sweet tooth.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So easier on digestion, get your fiber in a tasty way, and you're using just more pure ingredients than we're seeing in
Hmm.
the market for other
Yeah.
treats out there.
It's the highest protein grain ever.
Uh-huh.
The most comparable one would be quinoa. And even that, like, it has more fiber, I think, than quinoa, especially when it's fresh milled whole grain. And then the protein is actually higher. So there's a couple other brands that are doing really cool stuff with einkorn that's
Hmm.
not like in the cookie space, making
Yeah.
crackers and pasta. But the
Okay.
macros on the pasta are amazing.
Yeah.
For one, you feel good that it digests really well. But yeah, it's like 8 or 9 grams of protein per serving. Again, like 10 grams of fiber.
Yeah, that I definitely thought of pasta when you were talking about the difference between gluten intolerance here and then what we hear about in Europe still that it just doesn't exist the same there because we've what we've done to our wheat and flour here in the U.S.
Yeah. So like again, yeah, in Europe, a lot of the grain and the flour that they're using is like the durum semolina, and that's
Hmm.
really known in Italy and in Spain. And that is even like if you look at like the span of this timeline of like wheat, that's kind of somewhere in the middle. And so it's
Hmm.
been hybridized a little bit. It still has the like new gluten structure, but it's simpler than what we're eating in the United States. So
Yeah.
everyone who goes to Europe and says, I ate the pasta, I ate the bread, I felt fine.
Right.
This is even like 10x that, I would say.
Yeah. Very exciting stuff. Okay, so take us back. I want to hear more about the business's journey. So you got started baking in your kitchen at home for your family. How do you start making this into a business?
Yeah, so no business plan. There was no even idea of selling cookies or anything like that. It was truly like I was so particular about the ingredients I was using. We've
Hmm.
kept those same standards and we always will. Like I went out and found, ancient regenerative farms for my grain and I did the same for all of the other ingredient
Okay.
suppliers. So we partnered with a great farm for the maple syrup and it was never about like how do I profit on this? How am I making money? How do I build this business? It was
Hmm.
how do I make the best tasting cookie that makes you feel good? And I think that's why we found success, is because it was not like, let's squeeze this more. Like, it was always product and customer first, because the
Hmm.
first customer was myself and my family and my loved ones. And I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking, about the bottom line. And we've kind of reverse engineered everything from that. But the really great thing about going from that initial recipe into now, selling the product, is a lot of our like competitors or the healthy cookies on the market are using oat or almond flour, or like honestly
Hmm.
a more expensive base than us, because wheat is has always been cheap. It's very easy to grow. Like, so the
Hmm.
going back to like kind of the regenerative family farming side of this isn't like a super water intensive process. It's they really throw out grain, there's cover crops, and then they harvest it and mill it fresh. Like, there's not a
Hmm.
lot that goes into it in terms of like driving up price. So it brings down the cost of our good
Okay.
to be able to compete with like a lot of the other healthy cookies. So at the end of the day, like, we're still able to sell our cookie with the highest quality and highest standards without kind of breaking our bottom line. But sorry, I kind of like went around the question. I didn't know, at the time I was pretty certain that the cookie had potential.
Hmm.
Everyone who had tried it had loved it. My family is very straightforward, like traditional American family. Like, we're health focused, but none of them were extreme. None of them avoided gluten. None of them had specific diets. And when I introduced it to like my extended family, everyone ate it. And they all have like huge sweet tooths, and they would all eat normal cakes, normal cookies,
Hmm.
everything. They didn't think about that stuff like I did. And so that's when it kind of like clicked in my head. I was like, okay, if everyone likes this product, that's where it has like the real potential to be something big. If it's really, that small niche of extreme health focused or health conscious people, I'm
Right.
dealing with a lot smaller of a market. And so I felt
Exactly.
more confident the more people who tried it who I knew didn't care about health. And there were a couple like key like moments where I was like, whoa, this is like exciting, because I've baked for these people in the past, or I've made, desserts for these people in the past, so to speak, and they like didn't want to eat them because they were too healthy. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's a lot of the stuff you see on the grocery store, like, and people like market vegan, like raw, like all this stuff. And 95 or even more percent of the population doesn't want to buy that or try that. Like, when they're looking for sweets, they're looking for indulgence, and
Hmm.
they don't care if it's better for them or even good for them.
Right. There.
Yeah.
This is.
It's that indulgence at the end of the day. And so
Yeah.
it was it was figuring out that I didn't want to go low cal, like low sugar, low fat. Like, it was,
Hmm.
let's use just the best version of all these things and make sure that we're getting it responsibly and making our product to the highest of standards, and then getting it out to the people and getting feedback. And so that's what we
Hmm.
did, is we went to the Malibu market, and
Okay.
in the beginning of last year we started doing kind of market testing. First week, we like sold out pretty much within the first 2 hours of being there. And everyone who tried it ended up buying the product because they were sold. Like, and that was kind of like that validation, like, whoa, people are looking for this. And it's a small sample size. Like, you're also in Malibu, very kind of not only wealthy demographic, but also health conscious demographic. And so I wasn't going to, be like, okay, this is the best thing ever. But the more we expanded, the more I started getting in front of people who weren't necessarily so focused on their health, and they could appreciate and enjoy the product, is when I consistently like felt validated and was willing to take more and
Yeah.
more risk.
So, you were having success at the Malibu market and sold out there, and then where did you take it next? To more retail, or did you open up your own online store at that point?
So the funny thing is, I think we had only done one market, and I was like on LinkedIn, and the day after, and I saw like this post about, again, I was new to CPG. I had just started this cookie company without even knowing what like the term CPG meant. And I was just scrolling through LinkedIn. My LinkedIn was slowly transitioning from like architecture to CPG.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They were catching up with. There's a
Yeah,
change
it
here
was,
with the
the
sun.
algorithm was catching up to what I was engaging with. And like, I saw this post about a place called Pop Up Grocer. Had no idea what it even was. And I cold, like, just like DM'd the owner on LinkedIn. And I was like, I have this new cookie. I think it would do really well in your store, because I read a little bit about what they did and what their mission
Hmm.
was. Again, we had no like packaging, no product, no nothing. And we basically got like accepted on the spot, which I didn't know like how big of a deal it was in the CPG
Yeah.
world at that time. But I knew what we were doing was unique because I had searched just called on Google, like einkorn cookies, like what's out
Yep.
there. Had that at that point, I had walked through the grocery stores,
Mhm.
and being in LA, like we have Air One, which has a lot of like the new and emerging
Sure.
brands. I was like, there's nothing that is using like, for one, like our same standards or this ancient grain. And so I knew we
Mhm.
were doing something unique. And Pop Up Grocer, like that later that month, like sent us the acceptance email, and I was like ecstatic. It was one of like the most euphoric moments of my life because I had spent like the past 3 months like putting everything into this cookie and this product without any external validation from like the true
Mhm.
CPG world. And I was like, whoa, like we're actually maybe doing something exciting. And so we went basically from having no product and no packaging, no nothing, to being on the shelves in New York like 3 months later, which was really, really exciting. Like at that point, I was like, okay, let's figure this out. I hadn't even ordered our cookie packaging yet, or we hadn't designed it. And so I remember the packaging arrived like 3 days before like the Friday before the Monday we sent to Pop Up Grocer.
Yeah, there's nothing like, tight deadlines there.
No. And then from there, we were the number one selling product in the fridge that weekend at Pop Up Grocer on opening weekend.
Wow.
And that was, again, just like one of those moments where I was like, wow, we're sitting next to legit brands now in this fridge. It's not just emerging, it's not just like brand new emerging companies. I mean, there's names like Coconut Cult and Ithaca Hummus and some
Sure.
some brands that are nationwide at Whole Foods and Sprouts and like have diehard followings. It's no longer just like us playing in our backyard in Malibu. It was, okay, this is like the who's who in CPG.
Yeah. Yeah. So, definitely, quick education on, how do you get packaging? How do you scale up your manufacturing, get the product
Yeah,
across the country?
yeah. And we like did everything in house. We designed the packaging and didn't really know if it sold. So that was the first test
Okay.
of like, will this sell on the shelves? Because everything we were doing at the time was sampling based. It was like people tried and
Mhm.
then they buy. But this was no trial. This was just, is someone going to pick up this package off the shelf? And with
Yeah.
that first weekend, people were posting about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like this product is real and it has weight to it. So that was really,
Yeah.
really exciting. And from there, it's just been like honestly a slow growth. We
Mhm.
didn't feel the need to go and start running to trade shows or pitching to, big buyers or like
Mhm.
landing some national deal, because I've also now been around long enough to hear the horror stories about landing on big shelves and not being able to stick around. And we want a brand that lasts. We're not chasing a trend. We're not trying to be
Yeah.
the next biggest thing or viral thing overnight. Like we want to be around forever. And that starts with building our customer base. So like marketing on social media and finding people that like really connect with our product has been our number one really priority.
Yeah. So where are you in stores now? Where can people find you?
We are now in, I want to say, close to 50 retailers. It's growing like by the day. We just like put our product on Air Goods and Fair like last
Mhm.
month, and it picked up traction really quickly on those. We almost get a new account every single day, I would say, which
Mm.
is really exciting. Like places all over. We just got our first Hawaii account yesterday. We're starting to be more in the Bay Area, Southern California, obviously, like around in and around LA. We're really
Mhm.
focusing on still those like boutique cafe retailers kind of thing, and not big box or grocery, but saw initial success and initial adoption in those spaces. So we want to really saturate all those boutique and independent retailers where people at the end of the day discover products and kind of fall in love with products when you're not sitting with,
Mhm.
5,000 other brands and
Sure.
trying to be found in a sea of other things. So it's
Yeah.
been really cool. And we've seen really great sell through initially, like first order and then second order next week. The buyer or the owner of the store tries the product, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be eating through all my profits
Yeah.
because I can't stop eating
Place
these."
another order quick.
Yeah. So it's been really cool seeing that like initial traction that again gives us confidence in later this year going and being like, "Okay, let's talk to these bigger players. Let's talk to these regional chains and let's
Mhm.
actually start scaling to some of that big box."
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Fair and, Air Goods. There's one other brand that's, on the podcast, I believe that they use Air Goods as well, Dirty Virgin, and so
Okay. Yeah.
non-alcoholic cocktail drink. So, uh, as a alternative way to get into retail with low, especially for brand new brands, not going out and hiring a broker and spending a lot of resources on doing that. So,
No, yeah. We have been so like razor thin on all of our spending and been scrappy at the end of the day. Like we've had a lot of opportunities to do things and we've built
Hmm.
relationships that have allowed us to do that because we don't have a budget. I was fresh out of college. I didn't have a big savings account. Like I didn't have money to invest. Like I invested every dime I had and then some, but it wasn't like, and we weren't going and raising money immediately with just a product, which now that I've been around, I see a lot of brands doing. And I'll talk to, capitalists and angels and stuff. And I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, people do send out decks with no product traction, no sales, just like
Pre-revenue.
an idea and a pure idea. And I'm like, that's crazy to me because I would never be willing to do that. Like, but we've made it this far and it feels really good knowing that we have that in the back of our pocket, like to be so
Hmm.
scrappy. Yeah, we just pulled off like a campaign with a influencer. We did a collaborative cookie with them and it was all organic. She reached out to
Hmm.
us. She fell in love with the product. We didn't reach out to her and pay her $25,000 at the end
Yeah.
of it, which is
It's
like,
the best when it happens that way.
yeah. And so we're going to like continue doing that as we grow using existing relationships. And I always tell younger founders and people who are talking to me like at the end of the day, like we are in the business of relationships. We sell a cookie, but if we
Hmm.
don't build every single relationship and shake hands and get introduced to the next person, like
Yeah.
that's how we want to grow like sustainably long term.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we started off our conversation today talking about relationships and within the market and, kind of full circle there with
Hmm.
relationships can be one of your most important marketing assets as well as you try to do this in a cost effective way for the biggest exposure.
Totally.
So are you still using the same packaging in retail today that you did that first batch?
Yeah, it hasn't changed much. We did a slight kind of like it was kind of like under the radar almost
Okay.
rebrand. We changed our word mark and our we did used to really go by clean dough co. It was always clean dough co. We started kind of going by more just clean dough and we changed.
Yeah.
This is actually the packaging right here. I can but just it's super simple. Clean cookie is product and clean dough word mark, but it kind of speaks for itself. It grabs attention. People are always asked like, "What is clean cookie? Like, what is that?" And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes them flip around the packaging. And with
Hmm.
all the greenwashing and health washing that's going on in the world, it's refreshing for people to turn over the backside of the pack and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like this is what I've been looking for." And so we're pretty glad with like the brand and how it's start like I literally was sitting on my couch and Clean Dough came to mind. And it was
Hmm.
the first gut take like name for the brand, and it has not changed since. And we haven't
Yeah.
rethought it. You can, and here you hear these stories like people going through hundreds of names and
I know, it
spending.
just always sounds so torturous,
Yeah,
but
it's
when
like
you have
how do you
something that
actually
fits.
decide?
Yeah.
So being able to do it first try and not ever think about it again, and people like it. So I
Yeah.
think we'll stick with that.
Well done on that. So, what do you think, going through this journey now, and you've had a pretty fast entry into this industry, but also gaining great momentum? What do you think has been some of the harder lessons you've learned in the process?
We've definitely made our fair share of mistakes, and I think one of them, kind of going back to that grow at your own pace, was
Yeah.
trying to like keep up or trying to grow with like these companies that have been behind the scenes doing things for years. And then all of a sudden you see them everywhere and like comparing yourself to those companies was like, that was the thief of all of our joy. And it was like kind of taking a step back and being like, look, we're growing, we're doing our thing, like we're gaining traction. We don't need to try and rush everything. And with rushing everything, put us in that like almost fight or flight mode. Like we were constantly
Hmm.
running around chasing every little opportunity. And I had to like really take that step back and slow down and be like, look, we need to do this sustainably. It's not going to
Yeah.
be a sprint. It's not 1 year. It's not 2 years. This is going to be like 10 years of slow, just like sustainable growth. And I found myself, yeah, rushing things and
Hmm.
ordering too much packaging or having packaging arrive wrong and then, having to eat that.
Yeah.
Or we still have like, we just stopped selling like jars of cookie dough this past like couple months. We slowly started to phase it out. And I still have like thousands of labels that, we'll never end up using. And at the time I thought this is what we're selling. This is what we're doing. And like, it's been nice to be able to also like pivot quickly and be
Hmm.
nimble, but at the same time, it's like now I know not to get ahead of myself and really think in short term, like have the long term, like, always in the back of my mind, but like playing more of that short term, like let's figure out what we're doing in these next couple of months because stuff changes every single month. And we really never know what's to come.
Yeah. I think that's a great point because I think, especially in the earlier parts of your journey, there's just so much excitement and energy, and you just want to go and just
Hmm.
be out there and let people try your product and get feedback. And then there's a little bit of that, like perceived or not, external pressure of we have to do it before somebody else does it, or, this is our niche that is going to make us different from everybody else. We have to own it.
Hmm.
But, that comes with more risk as well. Like those labels, unfortunately, are now
Yeah,
either memorabilia or garbage, depending
exactly.
on what you want to do with them.
And yeah, in the beginning, I was definitely chasing that. Um, I like felt like, oh my gosh, I need to be that first product,
Yeah.
and I felt the same way. Like someone else is going to do it, and then you look at like the established kind of like categories that have been so rehauled, and you like obviously the first that comes to mind is soda, and you think of
Hmm.
Olipop and Poppy, and it's like the same Coke and Pepsi thing. Like you
Yeah.
kind of do need like that competition or like that balancing act of
Yeah.
like, and then I also listen to founders. One, the first that comes to mind is Bloom with Greg
Hmm.
Lavecchia, and he talks about how they actually go into more saturated markets and they like being the third or fourth like skew in that, because then they're not the ones like spending all the marketing dollars. Everyone knows what healthy soda is now, and so
Yeah. You
now
don't have
they're
to do all the
just another one.
education. Yeah.
Yeah, and they
That's
can just
true.
become now the best tasting one, or have their own unique value prop. I also started realizing, I was like, what I'm doing is so like crazy. Like honestly, if someone else wants to try and do it, go for it. But I was willing to spend so many hours in the kitchen, like 16 hours a day, just like baking cookies and running to event to event to event and getting the
Yeah.
product out there. And I was like, if someone else is willing to hustle that hard, then like, they're probably in a good spot. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, people buy from people, and cookies are multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's
Right.
always going to be enough for it to go around.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what most, not all, but most people in the industry do realize is there is kind of enough to go around. It's a literally consumable product. So
Hmm.
people are always trying new things. They want to try new things. Trends and taste and health are always evolving too. So there is room for new innovation and multiple players in the market. All right, Jake, before we wrap up today, this has been a great conversation, but we got to share with us, what do you think has been your recipe to revenue in your journey so far?
That's such a good question, and I love that that's the title of the show. But it's the recipe to revenue is the passion and following your heart, and like that feeling in that moment of like, my gosh, I'm onto something, like this is new, unique, and then taking that and turning it into a sellable, like scalable product is so exciting. And I think, yeah, following and finding your passion and taking that and sharing that with the world. At the end of the day, that's what sells people. People buy from people. They're not buying from corporations, or they buy the brand, but people love connecting with me and the product. And those are your diehard loyal customers. Finding those people in the beginning and making those your super fans and like making real connections with them, building those relationships. Like I mentioned, like you're going to save so much time and energy and money if you have multiple people who are huge fans of you and your
Yeah.
product, instead of trying to do it all yourself or spending that extra money.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice right there. Well, Jake, thanks again for joining me on Recipe to Revenue. Just let everybody know where they can find you online, or if they want to connect with you.
Yeah, so
Where's the best place?
cleandoughco.com. We sell packs of cookies. There's if you ever want to like actually reach us directly, like the Instagram DMs, where we actually read every message and respond to every real message, and always happy to get people, hooked up to try the product. We know like committing to a large pack of cookies that you never tried online is always a daunting thing. So yeah, reach out, talk to us. And then in a lot of states now, yeah, we're starting to pop up all over, but small independent retail, major metropolitan areas, New York, Miami, Chicago, but also smaller family like farm shops, even we're seeing like
Hmm.
in Oklahoma and Carolinas and stuff like that, and Maine.
Yeah.
And so like more rural places that people connect with the farm, the small family farm kind of
Right.
story that we have also. So if you do have a small independent retailer and you want them to carry the product, like you're the best salesperson, let them know that you want to see, a clean cookie on the shelf. And otherwise, yeah, feel free to reach out. I always am interested in hearing stories and talking. So Clean Dough
Fantastic.
Co on Instagram, and I'm Jake. Follow me on LinkedIn or message me on LinkedIn, open book. So happy to talk.
Excellent. Yep. And we will put the link down below in the show notes and on the blog post that goes along with this episode, so everybody can just go ahead and click and check them out. Thanks again,
Thank
Jake.
you.
Great to chat with you today.
Thank you, Leah.
Thanks for listening to Recipe to Revenue. If you're building in the food, beverage, or hospitality space, you're in the right room. Subscribe for more founder stories and real-world growth strategies. And if this episode helped, share it with a friend and leave a review. It's how this show grows. For tools, templates, and ways to work together, visit recipetorevenue.co. I'm Leah Messina. Until next time, keep cooking up the next revenue stream.